everyone,
Hello.
and welcome to today's Hackerearth webinar. And today I have with me a pretty handsome, one of the best looking Batmans ever you'll see on screen. He's none other than Mike Cohen, who likes to call himself Batman, and you can see how big a Batman fan he is by looking at his wall behind. And we are pretty glad to have him today for our session. And a little bit about Mike. So Mike is the CEO of Wayne Technologies. Another thing that shows you that he's a big Batman fan. And the topic today that we'll be covering is messaging best practices for the real world recruiters. So all you recruiters out there, anyone who's involved in the recruiting cycle, this webinar is just for you to get hold of that perfect talent that you've been looking for. So without any further ado, we'll switch over to Mike, who will be giving out today's presentation. And a little bit about the platform. In the platform, you have a questions panel in which you can ask your questions anytime. We'll be taking up the questions whenever you ask them. So before Mike switches on to the next slide, we'll address all the questions that you have. And yep, so Mike, the stage is all yours. Good luck, and let's have a great session.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I just want to clarify, can everybody see my screen right now? Yeah?
Yes, they can.
No.
So we've got multiple yeses from people.
Fantastic. Just making sure. It'd be weird if I started talking for no reason. Hey guys, so this is me. I hate self-promotion, so I'll just tell you, our company does contract sourcing, a brand new model that's never existed before. If you're interested, reach out. If not, still reach out. Let's chit chat and hang out. I will say before we totally jump into this, things are a little crazy. I'm feeling anxiety and the same fear around all of this. Working from home is definitely tough for people who haven't done it before. I remember my adjustment was very difficult. I think there's two sides to this. One, for messaging, is bringing the human aspect back to what we do, right? Talking to people how we like to be spoken to, and being comfortable being ourselves, and sending really high quality human messaging. I think the other side is I've seen a ton of webinars and talks about hyper customized emails. And I think one of the issues we face is that that's great if you're able to send out one-off emails all day. I don't know many recruiters, though, who have so few roles they can work on that they're able to send out one-off emails. I want to be able to talk to you guys about personalized messaging, but in bulk, and how to be human while doing it. So, agenda for today, we're going to cover 5 main points. One is understanding the personality types for messaging. I'm going to talk to you about how to assess that, kind of what it looks like, give you some live examples. I'm then going to talk about how to build those emails. How many times are we reaching out? How often are we sending these emails? And then we're going to talk about what I call looks matter. And not your look, you're all perfect snowflakes. I'm talking about formatting, writing style, just basically you're looking when you receive an email. So, right into this, the archetypes, the DISC assessment, unfamiliar, Myers-Briggs, more scientifically based. That's just my opinion. For me, a lot easier to identify online, at least what somebody's main personality style is. The first one, dominant, is like the alpha. They're the people who are going to take the lead more often than not, right? So if you're in a group trying to figure out what to do, they're normally the one to step up and say, hey guys, why don't we X and Y and Z, right? That's going to be those folks. They're normally like a very leader type. They have strong personalities. The influencer, as I just said, these are the people. I like to think of Ellen DeGeneres. I feel like if you're in a room full of people, naturally they would congregate around Ellen. Not just because she's famous, for sure that, but because there's just like an energy, right? They're fun, they're funny, they're engaging. Those are the influence folks. The other are the Steadiness, this is the S, right? These are people who are very much about the we. They like consistency. They like being a part of something bigger than themselves. For this, I went totally extreme on this with Mother Teresa. I obviously can't test her on this, but she, to me, embodies the bigger than yourself, about something more than you. And then the Conscientious. So this is the super data-driven, very bullet point-oriented, give me the facts, systematic type of folks. When you think about Conscientious, I'm typically thinking about like STEM grads, right? Software, technology, engineering, math, very to the point, right? So I picked Albert Einstein as like the big example there. So what I wanted to do is take a minute and say, hey, can you identify these people looking at their profiles, right? And the short answer is, yeah, you can, right? So first, and I've given all of these people this test, that the DISC assessment test, and I have their permission to show them here on the site. So yay, I guess. So Niti Mohan, super sweet, a great friend. Never would have thought in a million years that she would be a high D, but she is. And when we tested her, we found it super surprising, but it became evident in her online profile. And quick shout out for Niti. She is looking for a new recruitment job, and she's totally badass. So if you're hiring, probably ping her. So what I noticed when I looked here was high Ds are going to communicate typically a lot about I, me, and use power words, right? So you see things like highly motivated and driven, right? Strong background, exceptional relationship management, possesses excellent communication, right? This doesn't come across as like egomaniacal, but it does come across strong and leading and powerful almost would be a great way to describe it. So this, to me, I read and I'm like, oh, you might be a high D, but how can I double check? Well, I would go to her Facebook profile and I would look up her photos right here. And you'll notice when you're looking at this, there's a lot of Niti, right? Niti, there's Niti again, Niti. And these aren't photos of Niti. These are just her photos in general, right? She's in a lot of these photos. You're going to see some selfies coming up here, right? That's typically a sign of someone who's one of these D-type personalities. Is their photos are very they-centric, which is fine. Again, doesn't come across egomaniacal. It does come across, again, I'll use the word powerful. So that's going to be someone who is a high D, a dominant. Next, we have the high I. Aaron Daniels, really great personal friend of mine. Again, these are going to be the fun, outgoing. They love using exclamation points when they write. They use like colloquialisms, like catchphrases, right? And so when you read this, it starts off a little bit about like what he does, but then if we look here, it's I'm a heavy user of social media and love the thrill of the hunt! Exclamation point. I read something like that and can go, oh, okay, you're probably a high I. You love the thrill of the hunt. There's a little exclamation point right in there. Awesome. He has a passion for coaching, definitely a human interaction. But again, how can we be sure? Well, let's go check what his Facebook pictures look like. So remember, life of the party, fun. Look at this. If these photos don't scream super fun, hang out, cool guy to be around, right? Like just life of the party, I don't know what does, right? So this was a quick and easy way for me to look and say, oh yeah, you're definitely a high I, right? Moving on to the S. Remember, the S's are all about being a part of something bigger, right? Having a part of a team or an organization. And if you look here, his About Me is solely about his company. It's completely about PwC. And when you scroll down, nothing here, completely about Source Houston here, the organization, and that's it. It's just all company. And so this one was a little harder. I thought maybe he could be a C. right? Just super short, fact-oriented, until you look at his photos and you realize, oh, wow, he's barely in any of these photos. He's all the way over here in this. Here's a picture of other people, of other people, of other people. Here's like a good expand your knowledge about Source Houston a couple of years back. If you look at the photos of him, you'll even see really positive, really loves the daddy-daughter stuff. His daughter's also adorable, right? Steve Levy and Shannon Pritchett. He's not in a lot of these. These are the photos he is. They're literally Jason's photos or photos of Jason. He's not in most of them. So I'm like, okay, a little bit about the bigger picture here. The final one, Claire. So Claire is a high C. Remember, this is like super just facts and data. So ready? This is her entire about me section. It's one sentence. Experience. Uh-huh. Experience. Uh-huh. Super short, 3 points. 1, 2, 3. I did this. I did this. I was this. Right? So again, all right, let's double check. How do I know? Let's check what type of photos we're posting here. See what her background is. So I want you to know I'm friends with her. 1, 2, 3. That's all of her photos, period. Online, that is it. Super private, very introvert typically is going to be associated with this personality type. So it's a real easy way to tell, okay, this person's a high C. So let's get back to why this matters. So when you're emailing each of these personality types, they all want to be communicated with differently. We're not going to change the content. What we do want to do is change the way we're delivering the content. So when I'm emailing a dominant, here are the 3 things I want to focus on, right? Quick, dirty, give them the bottom line, focus on the solution and the success, and be brief. They do not like a ton of words, a ton of content, and a ton of data, right? Hey, here's why I'm reaching out. Here's the deal, right? Here's what we're trying to do. Here's the win, and really brief. Thank you. Let me know if you're interested, right? That's going to be how I'd reach out to a high D. A high I, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. Super positive energy. They don't want a ton of those details that maybe a high D or an S would look for, and they love humor, right? These are the folks who, when they receive a meme or a GIF, that immediately speaks right to them, right? They're able to relate to that right away. The advice for writing these emails, smile and then write. If you're smiling, you're naturally going to have a little bit of a lighter air about how you're communicating. The high S's, these are all the we's. They love the stability. They love consistency. They love being a part of something. So important, be personable, be amiable, right? We want to be friendly and warm when we're writing, but we want to make it really about the team, the mission, the culture, the organization. We don't want it as much about this role, right? You're going to do this. You would do this. This is a lot of we language. We are going to do this. You'll be a part of a team doing this. Our organization is doing this. The last are the high C's. So these are people who want to focus on the facts and the details. They don't like the fluffy, right? That's not their deal. And they love bullet points by and large. What's the best example I can give you of this? I know we all know these people, or we are this person, right? When I call or I get a call from someone who's a high C, I answer, I'm like, hey, this is Mike. I don't normally answer as Batman, believe it or not. And they're like, hey, question, did you get that email about blah, 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 right? And I'm like, oh, I am having a great day. Thank you so much for asking. How's your day going, right? That's not their jam, right? They want to get right into it, get right to the meat and the potatoes, and boom, get out and be done. That's how they like to be communicated with, both in person and, more importantly, via email. So I'm going to take a quick break. I don't know if I have the ability to see questions here, but if I do, I'm certainly going to look for them and see if I can answer any questions that you guys have right now. Questions?
So Mike, I don't see any questions till now. Uh,
Okay, cool.
so I guess we'll
Great.
continue. And so guys, if you have
Yep.
any kind of questions at any point of time, please feel free to write them in the questions panel, and Mike will be taking them up pretty soon.
Yeah, I will take them live, guys. You want to see stuff, I will gladly show it to you. I go live a bunch, so whatever it is I can do that would help you, ask the question, and I'll show you whatever I possibly can. So next on the agenda is talking about follow-up messages, right? So far we've covered the DISC assessment, how do we identify different personas, and second, how do we actually find those types of people and identify them online. Now we're talking about the follow-up messages and the cadence of those messages. So PricewaterhouseCoopers actually put out a study. Jason Vogel gave this talk several years back at HR Gulf Coast Symposium. They put out a study. The average number of candidate touches that it takes to receive a response, 7 to 12, right? That's touches, not messages. I think that'd be super aggressive for messaging, but that means looking at their profile, connecting with them on LinkedIn, following them on Twitter, right? All of those are touches. For me, I set my rule at 5 to 7 follow-up messages. I have a minimum of 5 messages that I'm sending to people. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. Number one, write out your sequences ahead of time. So that way you know what you're going to say, you know what information you need to gather, and use an email automation tool, right? Or if you don't have an email automation tool, that's okay. Write it in Google Docs or write it in Microsoft Word and save that. I would capitalize your modifiers, right? First name, last name, and then use things like calendars or tasks to keep track of what messages have gone out when and when you have to follow up with them. I'm going to show you all of my examples for this once we get towards the end and show you what my messaging looks like, the efficacy. I'm going to also show you why it's important to send 5 messages, specifically 5. And I think you're going to be a little bit surprised by what you're going to see. So here's the big one. Here's the jam. I'm going to stop after this one and show you emails, but this is super important. How do you actually send messages to 100, 150, 200 people at a time while remaining custom, right? While remaining unique, not sounding spammy. That's the key here, right? I think someone told me that the national average for recruitment email response rate is like 18%. That's the highest I've heard. I'm typically shooting for somewhere in the 30s. Is what I consider a good email response. If I'm in the 40s, that's great. If I'm in the 20s, that's fearful for sure. I need to reassess. So how do we do this? Personalization is key, right? If you take the Sourcing Institute's accreditation, that's Shally Steckerl's organization, they teach the 7 points of personalization. He states we want to include these in all of our emails. I think that's aggressive. It's not my jam, so to speak. But I think it's important to have at least 2 to 3 of these in every single email. That way, when they're receiving it, they're not reading it like it's a spam message. They can read it in a way that it feels written to them specifically. And if you're thinking, well, how in the world do I do that? Here's actually what a message would look like. Here's an example of the 7 points of personalization, right? And so I could say, hey, Julia, I hope it's a good Thursday in Dallas. I saw your profile on LinkedIn. It says you're still in the recruitment space. I wanted to see if things are still going really well in your sourcing role at Wayne Tech. Super customized. There's no way that Julia reads that email and goes, oh, spam, right? Mark that as spam, delete it. There's no way. That is clearly written to that one human. And here's the thing, it's not. It's written to however many people you're able to put into your email automation. So I'm going to stop there. Again, feel free to stop me, ask any questions that you guys have right now. And I'm going to show you what it actually looks like. So here are actual messages that I send. And I'll show you one for an InfoSec manager. So this is for the New York Times. This just finished sending, I think a couple of days ago, right? Sort of 79% open rate and a 45.6% response rate on 150 contacts. So this is effective. This is a great email chain. Let me show you what it looks like, right? So my first email, I write for people who are high Ds. How do you know? Hey, things going great at your company? Short and sweet. And then TLDR. If you are unfamiliar with TLDR, that stands for too long, didn't read. Really quick and easy way to say, hey, here's what this email is about. You can literally read this one piece right here and you can stop. Next, I'm using really powerful, as we call it, or strong language. We have a strong engineering culture. We have great benefits, a huge amount of data. Those are strong words, right? Strong focus on InfoSec. You'd be running the engineering and ops teams. These are things that a high D reads and goes, oh, wow, okay, that's pretty awesome, right? I also throw in this because the New York Times has insane Glassdoor reviews. So my first message is for a D, and I'll tell you, I always A/B test my first email. I use something like this title for one of them, and for this one, I put their company name. Their company, not the New York Times. What you'll notice is the open rate on their company is always going to be higher. I've been trying to find a way to break this for years, and I am incapable of doing it. So far, their company name has the highest rate of opens and also typically responses. So keep that in mind. What I will share with you, and this is a tidbit I share when I train organizations, you have to clean up this data. You have to clean up this data. What do I mean by that? Well, if we're looking at the contacts I have in here, we're not actually going to reach out to Mohammed and say, hey, Mohammed, how are things going at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport? I don't know that sounds particularly great. How are things going at, right? This person has large financial company written on LinkedIn. So you can't say, hey, Eric, how are things at large financial company? Spam, deleted, that is done, right? You know instantly that is a spam message. So we need to make sure we're cleaning up this data so we don't actually come across spammy. Seems pretty logical, but a lot of people don't use that. Someone asked, do I use specific font style, size, and color? So color, black always. Size, typically somewhere between an 11 and a 14, much bigger than that, can get caught up in spam boxes. In terms of font, super important to use things that do not have a serif. A serif is that little curve that you see at the end of certain letters, right? Those serifs cause people to take a longer time reading a word to identify what that word is and what those letters are. And we want these super easy to read. The top ones are sans serif, right? That sans is the French word for without, serif, Arial, and Georgia. You can also use Times New Roman, but it looks a little blocky, in my opinion. I hope that answers your question, Shruti. Alan asks, your emails appear more brief. The opinion between long versus short messages. It's not an opinion. There's a study on this. The study says very clearly, short messages and white space are visually appealing. This is not 1985, 1990 anymore, where people are sending out these massive blocks of data. We're dealing mostly with millennials and Gen Z. We're dealing with a lot of, Gen X and boomers who are used to functioning in this faster-paced, tech-savvy world. This is hard for people to grasp. Most people, particularly millennial and Gen Z, read emails the same way that they do text messages. I don't know if you guys ever get that text message that you have to physically scroll to read all of it. I know when I get that, I'm like,
Mom, what are you doing? Like, come on, just like give me the gist here, you know? So super short. I'm going to show you again kind of what that looks like and why, Alan, but great question. Alan asks again, does that automation and the name, company, et cetera, come from the automation tool? So it comes from when you upload candidates. You can either upload them from LinkedIn directly, or you can upload them from a CSV or an Excel file and map the fields. So once you map the fields, that's how it identifies what goes there. What does my response rate look like? Julia, I just showed that. Good question. Thank you for asking. And the deck, Alan, will be available. Just email me if not, and I can send it to anybody there. Fantastic. I think that's it right now. Any other questions? Feel free to ask. Let's get back into some of these emails and see what else we're looking at. So that is the high D. Now let's go into the high I. Brian asked, what's my automation tool? My tool of choice is Interstellar, the one I'm on right now. This little fella right here. You'll see interstellar.io. I also use resource.io, Gem, and Loxo, and Top Funnel. I'm comparing them right now to see who gets better response rates and misses the spam box more. I'll have in a couple of months some answers for you. It's taking time to test them. I wanted to have the answers by the time we did this webinar, but it's really taking time to run similar campaigns on different tools. So follow back up in a couple of months and I can give you my true choice, but I'm an Interstellar user. It's my number one go-to. The second email I send to an S. And the reason I do an S next is you're able to give a lot of data on the company itself, not just the role. So what you'll see here is, I hope you're having a great, day of the week and that I'm not breaking up your flow. Super warm, super amiable, right? Following up from my email yesterday, I always send it as a reply, not a new thread. I want them to see that I'm following up multiple times. And I mention, hey, I wrote you an email yesterday. And you'll see here, this sends one day after, right? And then, hey, here's why it might be worth a quick chat. We are one of the top 50 companies. We have 8 people on the team. We have a culture built around this. And this is a high visibility role focused on management, growth, and mentorship, right? Very team focused. Next, 2 days after that, I reach out, and this I write for my high Cs, right? This is super short, sweet, to the point. It's literally 2 sentences. Hey, following up, you open to chat about this role. That's it. After the high C, this comes my I. This is when I make a custom meme and I say something funny, or at least I think it's pretty funny, right? So if you know this, these are 2 security guards, and I think this is funny. People tended to think it was funny, I guess. I enjoyed it plenty, right? And I mentioned, hey, we want someone with a sense of humor, right? Hence the meme. We're a fun team to work for. And I leave that with, hey, let me know if this is in line, or at least if you got a chuckle out of the meme. And so a lot of people will write back and say, hey, that was pretty funny. I'm not looking right now, though. Let's keep in touch. And I go, great, sounds good. Send, follow up in 3 months, send meme, right? I know they like memes. I'm going to follow up in 3 months. We had a good communication. So that's my I. And my 5th email, I send a very me languaged final follow-up. So for me, what do I write? I say, making sure you haven't been captured by a couple of nefarious Australian shepherds, right? And then these are actually my dogs. And I write, just kidding, those are my dogs though, right? Hope things are going well. Let me know. Just want to make sure we're in touch for the right reasons, right? Super easy way to let them be able to write back and say, hey, not super interested, et cetera. Let's keep in touch. Also, people love cute animal pictures, right? Don't be afraid to send stuff like that. People read it. The ultimate reason why we send an email, it's the same for everyone. It's to get a response. If I knew sending a picture of a cat on a skateboard was going to get you to respond, guess what your email is? It's a cat on a skateboard, right? That's my goal. So let's figure out these things that work. Jake asks, what are my dog's names? This is Blue, and this is Honey. Honey's in the office with me right now. And they're adorable, and I love them to pieces. Yay! Thanks for asking, Jake. Now let's talk about a couple things. One, follow-up and cadence. So cadence, you're going to see here, I send the first email immediately. The second is 1 day after. The third is 2 days after that one, right? So if we're keeping track here, that's 4 days. 2 days after the third, that's 6 days. 1 day after the fourth, that's 7 days. I, however, do not send on weekends. So typically this workflow takes about 9 days to work itself through. It can take as long as 11 days if I catch 2 weekends. So people's questions before they come in are, isn't that a little annoying for people? Aren't you being a little too persistent? I'll tell you, I get probably 0.1% of the people who write back saying, hey, this is too many emails, right? That's 1 out of 1,000. The reason for that is if they read your email and think it's spammy, I promise you, they're not going to remember you the next time you send that email, right? I challenge anyone on this webinar, can you remember who sent you that spam email yesterday? Any of them, any of like the spammy messages, whatever it was, can you remember who sent it to you? Probably not, right? You'd be one of the first people ever to do that. So important to realize we don't want to be overbearing, but we do want to be persistent. People, believe it or not, appreciate that. A question from Dan was, do I send to personal or work email or both? I have a pretty strict policy around the personal email. We guarantee on our side, like we guarantee our clients 90% personal emails or higher, and we give them the option of whether we reach out via work email or not. Some companies ask that we do that, in which case that's fine, we'll do that. Some say no, let's respect that. If it were me recruiting for my own position, I do not send to work emails. Did you ever try using the company name and their specific title in the subject? So I haven't done that yet. That's a great question, Ellen. So what I believe you're saying is instead of something like this where we say, like Lockheed Martin, we would say Lockheed Martin dash, InfoSec manager. I haven't done that. And I think the reason I haven't done that is I think it would come across to that person like I'm reaching out to them about that role at that company. And I don't want them to think on first glance, like, is this person trying to recruit me for my own company? I certainly don't want that. The idea of using company, if we think about just the psychological component here, right? If someone writes me an email and the email says Wayne Tech as the subject, I'm opening that email 100% of the time, right? I'm like, well, what about Wayne Tech? What's my company? What's going on, right? If someone writes me and says Wayne Technologies, Inc., I'm going deleted. That's a spam message, 100% canned, right? But Wayne Tech, I'm going to open that. I'm going to see what's going on. Same thing, right? Using that Lockheed example. If you wrote Lockheed Martin Missile Defense Group, deleted, that's spam. If you just wrote Lockheed or Lockheed Martin, then you're like, well, what about it? What about my company? And I tend to see that gets people to open the email. So let's look at response rates. Someone asked about this earlier. Why do I send 5 emails? Let's do the math. If anybody's got a pen and paper or anything, this is a great one just so that you can validate why this is so important. The first email gets a total of a 16% response rate over 146 people. If I'm mathing at a high level, that's roughly 22 responses on the first email, right? Not bad. That's great. 22 responses. Let's go down. Now we've gotten the second email, 19% on 128. That again is about 22 to 23 responses on the second email. That's the same number of responses on both emails. So if you're only sending one, you're missing easily 50% of the responses. Let's go down again. 16% on 104. So that third email you send is another 16 responses coming through. Further down, the eye didn't do so hot on this one. This is definitely a concern. So maybe that's one person reaching out. And then that fifth email, you're still getting a 4% response rate on that 83. That's still at least 2 people responding back. So in this example, in this one, if you're not sending 3 emails, you're missing out on at least half, if not 2/3 of your responses. Let's go and just double check another one. I don't want you to think this is a one-off situation. This is for waste management. This is an executive role. This is a VP level role, right? We have a 68% open. That's a little low. 38% reply. That's right on point. Let's cover the steps one more time. It's written the same way. TLDR, boom, straightforward. First email, look at, again, 16%, right? It's about 17 people. Second email, 20% response rate on 76. That's the exact same number, 16 people. 9% on 22, right? It's another 2 people. 10% on 21, another 2 people, right? 6% on 18, it's another 1 person. Super important. Anne asks, are those unique responses? Those are unique responses, different people. The second you respond to one of these email campaigns, you stop getting emails. So every time you see the replies, this is just from this unique email. So there's a new person every time. That's how important this is when you're really looking at it. This is an executive role. The last one we'll look at is an SVP. This is for Business Insider, right? 15% on the first, 20% on the second, 12% on the third, 8%, and look at this one, 13% on this. That's 5 responses on the 5th email. How do I ensure I have accurate personal emails? Another great question. I use a tool called Zero Bounce. It's super, super, super inexpensive to use. And what you do is upload the emails in here, typically in a CSV. And what it will do is tell you which of them are invalid, which go to a catch-all, which go to a spam, which one are abusers. This is pretty awesome, right? Like which ones are people who hit spam, right? Like mark email as spam quickly. So I use a tool that helps me so I'm not ruining my IP and ruining my domain reputation. That's a great question. I'm going to take another couple-second pause here for any other questions. Does this tool cost anything to use? Yes, it does. All email automation tools cost money. They are, however, worth it. If you just look at responses, that's why I went through this. If you took these notes, great. If not, reach back out to me. If you show management, hey, we need a tool that does this, here's why, and you're able to show them the difference in response rates when you're able to send multiple, it makes it very easy for them to go, oh, wow, we're missing out over on at least half of the responses. Let's make sure that we do that. If you use Gmail, there is a mail merge system called Gmass, M-A-S-S, that is very, very, very inexpensive to use. If you're on Outlook, I'm super sorry, and you're going to have to invest money to do this, unfortunately. Anything else? Another 2-second pause here. Fantastic. Let's get back to the presentation. Again, guys, feel free to continue with all the questions, having them come, and I'll stop and ask as I can. So looks matter. This is super important, right? What was the email website? Ready? I think it was, let me see if I can put it in here. Interseller.io, send to all. Boom. So I just replied, I think it was interseller.io. I just sent it as a response to you. Zero bounce. So someone just asked, what was that bounce one that you sent? It is zero bounce. Cool. So looks matter. Also, I love the movie Mean Girls. I don't know why. If you're from my generation, that was a classic. What do I mean by this? Going back to Alan's question earlier, short paragraphs are read easier. The shorter the paragraph and the more white space, the easier it is for the human eye to take in the information and digest it quickly. Another quick tip and trick for you guys, definitely take this away. We want to make our subjects 38 characters or less. Why 38 characters, people ask. Right now, the smallest phone en masse in the market is the iPhone 8 and the Android equivalent. On those phones, the Outlook app and the Gmail app show 42 characters in the subject before it cuts it off. So if you have 43 characters, it will cut off a third of your message and put ... 42 characters and your entire subject shows up. If you're mathing, why am I saying 38 characters or less? When you respond, you're sending your second email, it's going to append RE:* to the beginning of your email. That's 4 characters. So that way you're ensuring all of your second, third, fourth, fifth emails also show up in total in the subject. Next. Funny. If yourself, people tend to get afraid of letting their personality out. There's this perception that we're supposed to be super professional and communicate in a certain way. We're not. This is 2020. We're expected to communicate as humans. When you were hired at your company, you were not hired as an automaton or a robot. You were hired as you, as a person, which means that you as a person line up with the culture of the organization. So be you, be yourself. Don't be afraid that someone's going to read the email and say, oh, that's unprofessional. Guess what? They probably won't fit in your culture, right? I had a client once share that they don't send GIFs or memes because they think it's unprofessional. I then found out all of their engineers communicate almost solely in memes and GIFs. And so we were able to talk through that and say, well, if someone writes back and says, that's unprofessional, they probably weren't going to fit in with the team, right? If they think that's unprofessional, the entire team communicates that way. So it's really important, right? Be yourself. It's okay to be funny. If you're not really funny, ask somebody else for advice first, right? Don't throwing it out there. In regards to that, no political jokes. None. You have to stay completely away from that. The easiest jokes to make and GIFs and memes to use are pop culture. Reference movies, reference shows, particularly if you're dealing with engineers, they're super up on pop culture, right? Make those references, never anything about presidents or leaders or government, et cetera, et cetera. As you saw in my emails, I was using a meme when I sent it to VP level positions for waste management. So everyone likes humor. Everyone likes to laugh, right? Human emotion is the #1 driver of human behavior. And so, guys, guess what the #1 emotion is that drives people to action? It's fear, actually. But #2 is humor. So, like, we're right there, right? Don't use fear, right? Let's use humor. But humor's #2. Let's make sure we're using that when we reach out to people. It will generate responses. There are very few people in the world who struggle with humor. Very, very. I've met one person in my life who doesn't like funny things. So, moving along. This is my quick example, Alan, of which of these emails are easier to read, right? So we have this one or this one. Just a quick glance. This one or this one. Which of these seems easier to the human eye, right? And so I'll have you know, if you look at this, they're the same email. They say the exact same thing, word for word. So I'll ask for everybody, which one of these is better? Batman or Superman? Batman or Superman, right? Obviously, Batman is better than Superman. Duh, we all know that. So yes, white space, short sentences. I'm going to finish with a story. This is a true story, and it is a personal story. And I think it's one of the most important things I've learned and been able to teach people. Being yourself right now, the way the world is, and I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm talking about the way that business has evolved is the most important thing that we can do if we want to build relationships and grow community and audience. So what's the story? My younger sister, one of my best friends, she is brilliantly smart. I love her to death. She graduated college in 3 years with a degree in accounting and a degree in finance, got her MBA from Northwestern, and worked at New York Life for like almost 10 years. And she approached me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about looking for a new job. Would you help me?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the only time in your entire life that I can help you? 100%. Yeah, sign me up." Yeah, Gary, I tell this story all the time, man. He said, I heard this one. So I said, yeah, let me help you out. So I said, you find the job you want to apply to. I'll find who the hiring manager is and their head of HR or recruiting. And we're going to craft a super custom email, and we're going to email it to their work and their personal email. So she finds a couple, they were okay, and then she finds one for a role at Bed Bath & Beyond doing strategic finance in supply chain management. So financial analyst in insurance, and now she wanted to go and become a strategic finance manager in supply chain. And I love her, and I said, hey, I don't know if that's a great fit. Like, that's not a really logical transaction or transition for you. But she really wanted it. I said, great. So we found the hiring manager's contact info, and we said, okay, craft a message. So she was crafting an email, and it went exactly the way you think it would, right? Dear hiring manager, I saw your job posting on LinkedIn. I think I would be an excellent fit based on the requirements you are looking for. I have a background from New York Life where I was blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh my God, snooze fest, right? And I said, Lauren, this is rough. I was like, you know that you could put in any company's name here and use this exact same message? She's like, yeah. I was like, no, that's bad. I said, hey, Lauren, why do you want this job? She said, well, I think my skills line up really well with the role. I'm like, hey, stop the BS. No, I'm your brother. I'm like, why do you want the job? She's like, well, I shop there. I have 3 kids. I like what they're doing to compete with Amazon. And I said, great. So why don't you write that? She said, I'm not putting in an email that I have 3 kids. I'm like, whoa, do you not have 3 kids anymore? I was like, the youngest is my godson. I was like, please tell me that all 3 are safe, you know? And I said, hey, I need you to trust me on this. It's the one area of my life I can tell you I know what to say here. And so she wrote the email and said, hey, I have 3 kids. I shop at your store, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll have you know, Lauren's been the manager of strategic finance at Bed Bath & Beyond since November of 2017. And the hiring manager made it super clear that he never would have even interviewed her if she just submitted her resume, because she was a senior associate at New York Life. It was not remotely a fit, but the email was personal. It talked to her passion. It talked to why this role. She spoke as herself and as a human. So I really encourage you guys, be yourself, communicate as yourself. People appreciate that more. We're humans, and we're in the most human trade imaginable. Let's bring that back. Let's be ourselves, and let's approach this job with a little bit more empathy and humanity. The recap. We went over DISC profiles. We covered how we reach out to people using their personas, what those emails look like. We talked about follow-ups. How many follow-ups do we send? What's the cadence that we send them? We talked about how to send individualized messages in bulk. And we talked about how looks matter. Formatting is super important. If you're interested, I do not make this stuff up. I do a lot of research for this. These are all the references that I have for this presentation. And are there any questions before I think Arbaz will probably take over here? Any other questions coming through? Dan asked, what basic tech stack would you recommend for an independent sole full cycle recruiter? Hey, Dan, reach out to me directly. I'm happy to talk offline.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mike, for such an informative and insightful session. To all the attendees as well, thank you for taking out time of your busy schedules to being a part of today's session. And we hope you all the best of health amid this coronavirus outbreak. So stay safe, stay at home. And thank you so much, and stay tuned for more such sessions coming up soon. Bye-bye.